I speak in the name of God, whoever creates, redeems, and brings new life. Would that we had the wisdom and courage to call out injustice and the hubris of political leaders and leaders generally, and I'm one of them in a small way. And we don't always do it well ourselves. And the risk of calling out, of course, and of speaking up for justice is, of course, we're aware of our own failings, aren't we? But also we're aware that there may be pushback and we may just not get it right. And again today we want to look at the wisdom and the faith of Jesus to draw out something of what a spirituality of response to injustice might be, and a spirituality that grounds us as well. So I hear today Jesus say, "Go tell that fox." Oh, I love that. He speaks about that moral reprobate, Herod Antipas, governor of Judah. Some religious leaders had told him to get going because Herod was trying to kill him. But true to himself, as the great lover, Jesus will not make room to this immoral, conniving despot. But there is a cost, and is that not why we often balk? And the cost will be his life. "Go tell that fox for me," Jesus says. Worried to those who are worried about upsetting the status quo and maybe who think their place might be turned upside down. "Listen," he says, "I'm casting out demons and performing cures today and tomorrow, and on the third day I will finish my work." Jesus knows whose life wins out. God's. Whose life is the real authority and source of authority. And in faith he foresees resurrection. And so in faith, looking, perhaps not knowing clearly about cross and resurrection entirely, but in faith, seeing this and speaking out in hope about the true way of human flourishing. And as if to underline the way these religious leaders' concern is often primarily about their own place and position, he annoyingly reminds them that they are following a well-trodden, broad but compromised path. And if they had read their history, they might see themselves more clearly. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. But Jesus counters the compromise of the religious leaders, Herod's immoral and despotic ways, and he comments about God's way reflected in his own ministry. So the contrast begins quite deeply. Go and tell this despot, in the light of the cruelty that he's undertaken and undertaking, what you've seen. Women and men are released from evil powers. They have known the healing of God. And Jesus underlies this by pointing again to resurrection and cross, as I said. On the third day, I finish my work. Cross and resurrection. He knows where this is heading, and he knows that judgment is there as well, and no less for Herod Antipas and his like. But the contrast and the difference between Herod, the worldly powers of empire and their hubris, and Jesus is the contrast between fox and hen, is it not? Now, Penny, my wife, is telling a story at Woy Woy this morning, which she shared with me and I'd forgotten about. It's a lovely story about a little red bantam hen that her family had when her children were small, Angus and Corin. Chook, as they called this chicken, this mother hen, used to follow the young children everywhere they went. And they carried her about, so she was very dear, very sweet. And it was their pet. And Chook also hung out with their pet dog. They used to lie together and play. And she'd also raised several batches of chickens. When they had to go overseas to work in Jordan, they left Chook with Penny's sister Julie, who lives on a farm near Gilgandra. And during that time, Chook had another batch of chickens. But then one day Julie went out and found Chook dead on the ground and feathers all around. A chicken hawk had attacked and killed Chook. But amazingly, not one chicken was lost. Chook had died protecting those chooks. I'm casting out demons and performing cures. How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings. And so this is why Anselm of Canterbury wrote this beautiful canticle, which we're going to say instead of the creed after the sermon. Jesus, like a mother, you gather your people to you. You are gentle with us as a mother with her children. This is the sort of sense of God we need to know, isn't it? Because discipleship, speaking up for justice, living out spiritual truths and realities is not easy. Following the character and the virtues of the Mother Hen, of the Mother God, enfleshed as we know in Jesus through the power of the Spirit, is not always easy. And today across the world at present, there are many who show the qualities and character of this faithful, self-giving Mother God who resists and stands up to opposition and injustice. There are examples across history of saints that we know and saints we never knew, and probably people we may not call saints, but who nevertheless in the image of God stood up to what is right or loved their neighbour and even their enemy. This week we heard of the death of Kimberley Senator Kitchen, aged 52. I must confess I'd heard of her once, but that was all. I knew nothing about her. And I expect most of us would be in the same boat. But she was perhaps the driving force for Australia to adopt what is called the Magnitsky-style laws. Hands up, who knows what that is? Well, that's the law that allows targeted sanctions against foreign officials who are despots, as in Russia today. She spearheaded laws that have been deployed that now are able to be put in sanctions against Russia after the invasion of Ukraine. And for that effort that she put in there, she won a major human rights award last year. I don't know if Kimberley was a person of faith, but in any case, Jesus' words rang true in her life. And isn't that what matters? Isn't that the case? That we who are made in the image of God, sometimes unknowingly, live out this life of the Mother God and showing care and speaking for justice. And as Christians, the other side of it is, we also know we fall too often short for the same reasons that others do as well. We are only human, but we look to God and to the strength of Jesus to fulfil our calling and our discipleship. Finally, we must hold this image of the Mother Hen, must we not? The Mother God brooding over the suffering Jerusalem, brooding over the suffering Palestinians, brooding over suffering Ukrainians, and especially weeping over Moscow and the people of Russia. We must stand with the Russians, the people of Russia, who stand up to that fox, Vladimir Putin, and all strength to them, because I don't think I would have the courage. But they speak up against his morally destructive and despotic ways. And that is our prayer, that they might know strength as well. And then Jesus goes on and says this, and I'm drawing to a close. See, your house is left to you. I tell you, you will not see me until the time comes when you say, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. And I ask you, where have you heard those words? Blessed, where have you said them? Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. You're going to say them in a little while. In the Eucharist, we do it. We do so because the Eucharist is the promised presence of God. So when Jesus says you won't know this until I come again, as it were. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord, because here he is. And this Mother God looks to us to embody this same grace. And that's what we celebrate when we gather around the table and we share bread and wine. We are celebrating God's presence within and among us, and that we are the ones now who are, as we say, Jesus' arms and Jesus' feet. So we continue to celebrate Eucharist for this reason, as indeed do people in the Ukraine and in Russia and in Israel, Palestine. And if we can just have another slide. Here on the slide is a picture that I took in Nazareth, where I visited an Arabic Christian community sharing Eucharist. They said these words too. And this picture just happened to be taken the day after there was rioting around Nazareth and Jericho and Nablus, because it was the day after President Trump wanted to move the embassy to Jerusalem. And of course, Palestinians know that this is disinheriting them even more. So here are these families with children celebrating the Eucharist, saying these same words: blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. In our Eucharist each week, and in Eucharists around the world, we say those words. Jesus lives in and through this Eucharist for us, in that from there we get strength, symbolically and really, at this table. In these words, we remember that this day around the world, Jesus is present. In the spoken words in English, Ukrainian, Russian, Arabic and more. And we cry with Jesus over Jerusalem, Kiev, Moscow and Canberra, because we're not perfect and we have a lot of work to do. In so doing, we look to the crucified and risen one to be with us all in our brokenness, but in our hope, in our hoped for Mother God, who is enfleshed among us in our community.